No one saw it coming. Not the scientists tracking celestial debris, not the powerful observatories scanning the skies each night, not even the ones who spend their lives dreaming of alien contact. It arrived suddenly, silent, fast, and uninvited. A sliver of mystery slipping into our solar system like a ghost passing through a locked door. They called it Oumuamua, a name meaning scout or messenger in Hawaiian. And for years, that's exactly what it felt like. A cosmic stranger carrying a message we couldn't yet decode. When it was first detected in 2017, telescopes caught just a fleeting glimpse. It was already on its way out, fleeing the warmth of our sun, with a trajectory that made one thing clear. This object wasn't from here. It wasn't from anywhere nearby. It had come from the stars. What followed was confusion, curiosity, and controversy. Scientists argued, was it a comet, an asteroid, a piece of something broken long ago, or was it something else? For nearly a decade, Oumuamua was a riddle, a blur, a shape half seen, half guessed. But that changed. Everything changed when the James Webb Space Telescope locked its gaze upon it. In the silence of deep space, a new image emerged. No simulations, no artist's impressions, just clarity, raw and breathtaking. There it was, slender, elongated, unnaturally smooth. It moved not like a rock, tumbling aimlessly, but like something deliberate, balanced. Its rotation was too perfect, its alignment too steady. One side shimmered faintly like polished metal, catching the sunlight in ways that made the hair on your arm stand up. The other side darker, textured, porous almost, as though it had absorbed the shadows of the void for millennia. But it was the symmetry that stole the breath from your lungs, not the randomness of nature, not the jagged contours of a wandering stone. Number this object was different, refined, sculpted even, as if something, or someone, had once shaped it for a purpose long forgotten. And then, those lines, those ridges along the middle that weren't cracks or shadows or tricks of the light. They were patterns, bands that wrapped around its body like fingerprints, too precise to be accidental. The Webb telescope wasn't built for this. It was designed to peer into the ancient light of distant galaxies, to unearth the origins of the universe itself. Yet here it was, turning its gaze not to the past, but to a question no one dared speak aloud. What if this wasn't just a rock? What if this was meant to be seen? As each frame of data poured in, it felt less like watching an object and more like standing face to face with a secret the stars had been keeping from us until we were finally ready to look, truly look, and ask the hardest question of all. What exactly just passed through our solar system? As the James Webb Space Telescope tracked it across the abyss, every frame it captured pulled humanity deeper into the unknown. The sharpness, the detail. It was unlike anything we'd seen before. This wasn't just a close-up. It was an unveiling. No dust trails, no gas vents, no signs of decay. Oumuamua glided through space in eerie silence, untouched by the violence of cosmic time. It bore no scars, no craters. Its surface didn't look like it had drifted for billions of years through meteoric storms. It looked untouched, pristine. That alone sent ripples through the scientific world. Nothing survives the void without being changed by it. But Oumuamua seemed immune, like it had been protected, or perhaps designed to resist. And then came the rotation. For years, older telescopes had suggested it spun chaotically, tumbling like a stick thrown into the wind. But the Webb image told a different story. It wasn't chaotic, it was rhythmic, predictable, almost graceful. It rotated along a stable axis with a subtle, hypnotic procession. A motion so smooth, so consistent, it felt less like physics and more like choreography. Like something long ago had set it spinning, and it had never stopped. The deeper Webb looked, the stranger it got. One hemisphere held a constant warmth, too constant. It didn't behave like a rock soaking up the sun. The temperature didn't fluctuate the way it should have. There was a gradient to the heat, a pattern, as if the object was somehow managing its internal environment. Naturally, this triggered a wave of unease. How does a lifeless object preserve temperature like that? How does a passive traveler resist erosion? How does something drift through star systems and still look new? Chemical readings added more weight to the enigma. Webb's spectrograph didn't detect what it expected. Yes, there were silicates, organics, even traces of metals. But some of those elements didn't quite fit. Their combinations weren't random. They mirrored precision. Some regions of the object seemed to have coatings, ultra-thin layers resembling vapor-deposited metal films, the kind of material we use on Earth in advanced technology. A surface like that doesn't just happen. Not with that purity, not with that distribution. And then, more unsettling still, were the areas where light didn't just reflect, but refracted, bent like through a lens. There are no natural lenses on asteroids. And yet, here was a body in space bending light in patterns that belonged in engineering labs, not the black emptiness between stars. The silence in the observatories became deafening. Scientists stared at the data, caught between what they knew and what they were seeing. Every rule seemed to bend around this object, the lack of debris trailing behind it, the perfect smoothness of its edges, the metallic shimmer that ran like a whisper across one side. And the question kept rising like a tide behind every observation, pressing against the limits of logic. What is this? Not just where did it come from, not just how old is it, but who, if anyone, sent it. Because Oumuamua didn't behave like a rock. It didn't wear the face of chaos. It looked intentional, not flashy, not loud, but precise, as though its creators, if it had any, had long vanished and left it to drift, waiting to be noticed. The longer you looked at the image, the more it stared back. It wasn't just a body in space. It was a presence, a quiet one, patient, and now seen. As scientists studied Webb's pristine image, something else began to emerge. Something faint, almost too subtle to notice at first. A pulse, a soft, rhythmic oscillation in the near-infrared spectrum. Not a signal, at least not one anyone could decode. But it repeated, every 27 hours like the beat of a distant heart, too regular to be random, too quiet to be dismissed. Thermal fluctuation? Maybe. Structural resonance? Possibly. But for those watching in the early hours of discovery, it felt like something more. Like a whisper, echoing across light years. And once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Because this object, this strange, beautiful object, didn't just reflect light. It reflected a question, a mirror held up to our curiosity. It wasn't speaking to us in words or signals. It was speaking in presence, in silence, in a kind of cosmic stillness that makes you feel small and seen all at once. Then came the most shocking revelation of all, the trajectory. Oumuamua hadn't followed the expected path of a passive rock coasting through the pull of the sun. No, its motion had been strange. A slight acceleration as it exited the solar system. Nothing explosive, just a gentle, unexplained push. Previous guesses blamed outgassing. Comets do that, release vapor and speed up. But Webb saw no jets, no cracks, no fractures, no vents, nothing. Just that same flawless, untouched surface. Smooth, sealed, intact. And still it moved, quietly defying gravity. Whatever had nudged it forward wasn't visible, and that only deepened the mystery. But perhaps the most haunting detail was its origin, or at least where it seemed to come from. Webb's instruments captured stellar light bouncing off its surface. That light bore fingerprints, spectral signatures that could be traced. Scientists matched those faint echoes to a distant red dwarf system, nearly 300 light-years away. A place teeming with planets, but known more for chaos than life. Why there? Why now? And why send or lose an object like this? Was Oumuamua a relic, a survivor from a shattered world, a dormant probe meant to awaken one day? Or was it just a fragment, a piece of something so vast and ancient we can barely imagine it? The Webb image didn't give us answers. Not really. But it gave us something else. Wonder. A deep, aching wonder that stirs the soul more than any proof ever could. Because in that image, in the quiet rotation, in the unnatural smoothness, in the stillness of an object that should have been weathered by eternity. We saw something bigger than ourselves. Not a spaceship, not a message, but a possibility that the universe might be filled with these silent travelers. That maybe we are not the only ones sending things out into the dark. That maybe, just maybe, we've been noticed. And now we watch differently. We search the sky not just for stars and galaxies, but for visitors, for scouts, for other Oumuamuas quietly slipping through the cracks of our attention, waiting for us to look up at the right moment with the right eyes. The James Webb Space Telescope gave us more than a picture. It gave us a moment where we stared into the unknown, and the unknown stared back. And in that exchange, we remembered why we explore, not just for knowledge, not even for truth, but for the wonder that lives between the stars.